It began on a cold October morning, the kind that seeps into the bones and turns breath into thin clouds. A row of bikes stood rumbling outside an old gas station, chrome shining under a pale sun, machines built for roads that demanded grit. Yet amid the sound of engines and metal, something else broke the rhythm. A tiny girl, no taller than the handlebars of the smallest bike there, walked toward them holding a faded backpack with one strap ripped. Her steps were small but deliberate, each one fighting through a fear that made her lip tremble. These men, tattoos, leather jackets, heavy boots, were the last people most kids would approach. But she lifted her drowning eyes toward them anyway, because she had run out of places where she felt safe. And when she finally spoke, her voice cracked not from shyness, but from a childhood carrying storms no child should carry. "Can you walk me to school?" It was a question that froze grown men in their tracks. If you believe every story hides a lesson, take a second to like, comment, share, and subscribe to Pawsitive Tales. Your support keeps these stories alive. The girl's name was Lily. 7 years old. Fragile in size, but carved from a survival that was far too old for her. She had been walking to school alone for months after her father left and her mother began working double shifts at a packing warehouse. There were older kids who mocked her, shoved her, and last week, someone dragged her backpack through mud while she cried quietly, trying not to draw more attention. No one stepped in. Not a teacher. Not neighbors. Not passers-by. The world had grown too loud, too busy, too indifferent, until this morning, when Lily gathered what little courage she had left and did the unthinkable. She asked a group of bikers for protection. The bikers were stunned. These were men who had been judged all their lives, considered dangerous from a distance, misunderstood up close. They knew what it felt like to be labeled, dismissed, feared for how they looked rather than who they were. And something in Lily's trembling voice, something in the way she stood completely alone despite being surrounded by people every day, hit a part of them that no one ever asked about. Without a word, the oldest biker, Gray, a man who carried years of road dust on his jacket and quiet sorrows in his eyes, turned off his bike and knelt in front of her. And when Lily stepped just a little closer, as if she felt safer in the shadow of someone the world told her to avoid, he felt something shift inside him. A responsibility. A fire. A need to protect what was small and hurting in a world that often swallowed such things whole. The next morning, the sound of engines roared down Lily's street long before the school bell. She opened her door slowly, expecting perhaps one biker. Instead, the entire group waited outside. A line of motorcycles gleaming under the rising sun, like armored guardians called from some forgotten legend. Neighbors peeked from windows. Curtains lifted. Doors cracked open. People stared. And Lily, clutching her tiny backpack, took a small step outside. Every biker turned their head toward her with quiet respect, as if she were royalty. For the first time in a long time, she didn't feel invisible. They didn't just walk her to school. They surrounded her, two in front, two behind, others on the sides, creating a moving protective circle around a child who had spent too long braving the world alone. The older kids who had tormented her stopped dead in their tracks. Something in the bikers' presence, in their calm silence, in the way Lily walked with them, her head slightly higher, shifted the entire energy of the schoolyard. Teachers stared. Students whispered. And Lily, little Lily, walked through the gates like someone who was finally allowed to exist without fear. But what the bikers did next was something no one expected. They showed up again the next day. And the day after. And every morning that followed. When Lily's mother apologized, embarrassed and overwhelmed, they gently told her she had nothing to be ashamed of. They stayed because Lily deserved to walk through her childhood without flinching at every shadow. They stayed because protection didn't need a law, only a heart. They stayed because somewhere along the road, they had lost their own sense of purpose, and Lily, without knowing, had given it back to them. Over the weeks, they learned more about her. How she loved drawing tiny flowers in the corners of her notebooks. How she carried her father's old keychain in her pocket because she still hoped he'd come home one day. How she quietly hummed to herself when she needed bravery. And one morning, Gray noticed she wasn't humming. She walked slower. Her shoulders were tighter. Something was wrong. That day, the bikers didn't just walk her to school, they stayed nearby long after she went inside. And when they saw a group of older kids waiting behind the back fence, planning another attack, they didn't storm over or shout. They simply stood there, silent and steady, their presence heavy as mountains. The bullies scattered without a word. Sometimes safety isn't loud. Sometimes it's simply a presence strong enough to remind the world that a child is not alone. Slowly, things changed. Lily started smiling more. She began drawing pictures of motorcycles in her sketchbook, bright ones with flowers painted on the sides. Her mother cried the first time she saw Lily run toward the bikers without hesitation, her arms wide open. The neighborhood changed too. The bikers, once ignored or judged, became familiar faces, helping mothers carry groceries, repairing broken mailbox hinges, lifting a fallen bicycle for a small boy too embarrassed to ask for help. The community saw them differently because they saw Lily differently. And in a strange, beautiful way, the smallest person in the neighborhood had rewritten how everyone saw each other. Months passed. Seasons shifted. And the morning finally came when Lily stood taller than before, her hair braided neatly, her backpack filled with books she no longer feared being taken away. She looked at the bikers and said, in her small but steady voice, that she wanted to try walking alone, just once. The bikers exchanged looks. They had become her shield for so long. But then Gray smiled, the kind of smile that carries pride wrapped in ache. They walked behind her that day, far enough to let her feel her own courage, close enough that she could still feel their presence if she needed it. And when she reached the school gates without fear, Lily turned back and waved, not because she needed them, but because she loved them. If this story has touched your heart even a little, don't forget to like, comment, share, and subscribe to Pawsitive Tales. Your support helps us bring more real stories to life. Before the ending, take a moment and comment what part of Lily's journey moved you the most. And so, the story didn't end with a grand moment or dramatic twist. It ended quietly, the way real healing often does, through mornings that feel safer, through fears that fade, through unexpected guardians who arrive not because they were asked, but because sometimes the world still holds people who refuse to let a child face the dark alone. And in the end, the bikers didn't just walk Lily to school. They walked her into a future where she finally believed she deserved to feel safe, seen, and strong.